Remember that pixelated computer game called Minecraft? It's still super popular, and I'm going to show you how to make an awesome Minecraft cake. You can make this with a square or a round cake. Either will clearly be a Minecraft cake once you decorate it, but I think a square cake is more in keeping with the pixelated graphics. Cover your cake with green fondant, using fondant smoothers to get sharp angles for the sides and top of the cake, and trimming any overhanging fondant. Place the cake on a cake board, securing it with a dollop of frosting. I've tinted fondant to make the main character, who's a boy wearing blue, a pig, a box of TNT, some green and brown squares to represent the pixelated landscape of the game, and the tall green monster, which is called a creeper. We're going to make some squares out of different shades of green and brown. You can use your judgment to cut squares approximately the same size, like this, but it will look best if they're identical. And you can do this by cutting a square template out of cardboard or another piece of fondant, placing it over your fondant and cutting around it to match the size. Use a paintbrush dipped in water to brush the back of the squares, and then stick them onto the sides of the cake. Use an offset spatula or the back of a knife to line up the squares perfectly. Put the brown squares lower than the green squares, since they're supposed to be brown soil with green grass on top. You can cover the sides or top completely, or just place a few clusters of squares around the cake. I'm using a damp paintbrush to brush off any clumps of powdered sugar stuck to the cake. Now we're going to make figures of the characters in the game. I'm starting with the boy in blue. Roll out a ball of light blue fondant mixed with a bit of CMC or Tylose powder, so it dries hard and holds its shape. Use your fingers to shape it into a rectangular block, and then pat it down with a fondant smoother to get sharper angles. Now make 2 little squares to be the sleeves. All of these colours of fondant have CMC mixed in, otherwise they'll sink into blobs instead of angular characters. Another rectangular block to be the boy's trousers. These have an indent down the middle to make 2 trouser legs. Now we need a skin-coloured block for the head, and a long log of fondant for the arms, which you can also pat down with a fondant smoother to make it angular. 1 more little block for the feet, made with grey fondant, also with an indent in the middle, and you can stick that to the bottom of the trousers using a wet paintbrush. Roll out a strip of brown fondant to make the boy's hair, sticking the head to it and then trimming around it. The boy's eyes are made with 2 rectangles of white fondant, rolled really thin so they don't bulge out of his face, and then 2 little blue squares. The rest of his facial features are made with brown fondant. I'm making an N shape first, and then a little brown square for the nose. Now I'm flipping the N into a U shape to make the mouth, or maybe it's a goatee or some kind of facial hair, I'm not sure. Now that we have all of his body parts made, it's time to assemble the boy. Use a toothpick to stick the trousers to the upper body, and then another toothpick to secure the head. Then just stick the sleeves and the arms to the body using a wet paintbrush. Again, you can use your paintbrush to brush off any clingy powdered sugar. Just make sure it's damp, not wet, so it doesn't leave a shiny, sugary glaze on your figures. Next we have the creeper. Start by rolling out a log of fondant and shape it into a rectangular block using fondant smoothers. Then make a ball for the head, shaping it into a square block, and a square for the feet. Roll some black fondant really thin and cut out 2 little squares for the eyes and the mouth shape, which looks like a taxi cab without the wheels. Stick the eyes and mouth to the head and use a knife to adjust the position so they're lined up nicely. Stick the feet onto the bottom of the body and stick a toothpick or wooden skewer up through the body and attach the head as well. If your characters are large and you're nervous about them toppling over when you put them on the cake, use a long wooden skewer instead of toothpicks. This will let you anchor them in the cake and give them more support. Make an indent between the feet and your creeper is done! Now for the pig. We need a body and a head, both made with balls of pink fondant that you pat down into blocks using a fondant smoother. Make the snout by rolling out a piece of pink fondant and cutting it into a rectangle, attaching it to the face with some water. Then 4 feet, which you can shape individually, or make a log, pat it into a long block, and cut it into 4 cubes. To make the pig's face, Roll white fondant really thin and cut out 2 little squares. Brush the body with a bit of water and stick a toothpick in, and then attach the head. We're going to let the pig dry on his back, so the weight of the body and head don't squash the feet. Stick the feet on with a bit of water and then leave it to set. Finally, we're going to make a box of TNT. Just roll a ball of red fondant into a square, using your fondant smoother to pat it down and get some sharp angles. Then use a sharp knife to score the top of the box with 3 lines across one way and 3 lines across the other way to make 16 little squares. Then roll out a long piece of white fondant and trim it into a strip. Use a wet paintbrush to brush around the red cube and wrap the white fondant around the centre of the red cube with the 16 squares on top. Use a sharp knife to trim the fondant where it joins. Roll out some black fondant very thin and cut out the letters TNT in capitals. Stick them onto the white strip on the red cube. You can put the letters on each side of the cube or keep it simple and just do the front of the cube. When your toppers have set after a few hours or overnight, brush where you want them to go on your cake with a bit of water and place them on the cake. You can add some more squares to the top of the cake if you like. I decided my creeper wasn't stable enough with the toothpick, so I pulled it out, measured a wooden skewer to be the height of the cake, plus half of the creeper's body, and stuck that into the cake. And here it is! A fun but not too complicated Minecraft cake! Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more cake tutorials every week.